All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into a real mystery, fibromyalgia. It's a condition that causes widespread pain, fatigue, and man, is it often misunderstood, even by, medical professionals. But we're going to go way beyond the typical explanations today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to look at fibromyalgia through some pretty interesting sources, actually. 3 YouTube videos featuring individuals under hypnosis talking about their experiences with fibromyalgia.
Hypnosis, huh? Okay, I'm intrigued already.
It might sound a little out there, but trust me, it gets pretty mind-blowing. Stick with us.
So where were we headed with this deep dive? What's the mission today?
Well, we're going to try to uncover some surprising perspectives, you could say, on what fibromyalgia is, like what might cause it, and even potential ways to heal. And we're looking at it all from a metaphysical angle. So,
Oh, I love it.
yeah.
Metaphysical. Okay, so before we get too far into the weeds, let's just do a quick recap. For anyone who might not be totally familiar with fibromyalgia, what is it like, medically speaking?
Okay, so fibromyalgia is classified as a disorder, right? Characterized by widespread pain, particularly in the muscles and bones, basically. Musculoskeletal pain is the term.
Right, musculoskeletal.
But it's not just pain. A lot of folks with fibromyalgia also have fatigue, sleep problems, memory issues, even mood swings and things like that.
Yeah, it can really impact your whole life, huh?
Yeah, it really can. And doctors, they'll usually diagnose it by checking for specific tender points on the body and then like ruling out other conditions, making sure it's not something else.
Right, right. Kind of a process of elimination, it sounds like.
Yeah, in a way. But what's fascinating is that the individuals in these videos under hypnosis, they paint a much more, I don't know, intricate, detailed picture of what's going on.
Okay, so what are they saying? What kind of picture are they painting?
Well, the interesting thing is they all describe really different experiences. Each person has their own unique story. But there seems to be a common thread running through all of them. Like, they all agree that fibromyalgia involves some kind of disruption, a disruption of the body's natural flow. But, instead of focusing on, like, nerves and signals the way doctors do, these folks are talking about energy and emotions.
Energy and emotions, huh? Okay. I like where this is going. So can you give us some specifics? Like, what are these individuals actually saying about their fibromyalgia?
Absolutely. So one of the individuals, her name is Ala, she describes these, she says she has implants placed along her spine by, get this, extraterrestrial beings.
Whoa, hold on. Did you say extraterrestrials?
That's right, extraterrestrials. And she believes these implants are causing her pain and disrupting the flow of energy in her body.
Wow. That's pretty far out there. But it's funny because it kind of reminds me of some of those like ancient healing traditions, like acupuncture and stuff. They talk about energy flow too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Acupuncture, it's all based on the idea that there are these energy pathways in the body called meridians, and that stimulating certain points along those meridians can help restore the flow of qi, which is like vital energy.
Right, Keat. Okay, so maybe Allah's explanation, even though it sounds, a little wild, it's maybe touching on something real, something that these ancient traditions have known about for centuries.
It's definitely possible. Now, another individual, Svetlana, she describes fibromyalgia as like a program, almost like a computer program. But this program is overlaid onto the body, and she says it especially affects the fascia.
The fascia. Okay, remind me, what's fascia again?
It's like the connective tissue that surrounds and supports muscles and organs throughout the body.
Oh, right, right. Okay, so this program, what does it do?
Well, Solana suggests it's connected to like deep-seated resistance to life's circumstances. Like it keeps her feeling stuck, and unable to adapt to change.
Interesting. So it's not just about the physical pain, but about this like mental and emotional resistance as well. It's almost like her body is like literally resisting life.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it actually ties in with some psychological concepts, like learned helplessness, for example. That's when, people feel like they don't have control over their lives. They kind of give up and become passive.
Yeah.
And that can impact their mental and physical health.
Right, right. So even though Svetlana's using this unusual language, this idea of a program, she's actually pointing to something that psychologists recognize, this connection between our thoughts, our beliefs, and our physical well-being.
Exactly. And then the third person we hear from, Karina, she sees fibromyalgia as a protective mechanism. Like it's her body's way of preventing complete emotional and energetic burnout.
Protective.
Yeah.
Interesting. How does she explain that?
Well, she talks about how, when we're under chronic stress, our bodies release hormones like cortisol, And cortisol, while it's helpful in small doses, over time it can lead to inflammation and other physical problems. So in Karina's case, maybe fibromyalgia is a manifestation of this, like heightened stress response. It's like her body saying, whoa, slow down, you're pushing too hard.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It's like, when you keep pushing yourself past your limits, eventually something's got to give.
Right.
And maybe in some cases that something is fibromyalgia.
It's possible. And it's really interesting how these explanations, even though they're totally different from like what you'd read in a medical textbook, they're still, kind of aligning with some existing scientific and psychological ideas. Like we're seeing connections to bioenergetics, the impact of trauma, and even the body's natural stress response.
Right. It's like these individuals under hypnosis are tapping into some deeper level of understanding.
Right.
They're seeing things that maybe we're just starting to grasp with conventional science.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what else is there to uncover? What other mysteries might be hidden within this condition?
Ooh, good question. And speaking of mysteries, we haven't even gotten to the possible origins of fibromyalgia yet. I'm dying to know what these individuals have to say about that.
Well, let's dive into that next because their explanations are just as fascinating and just as unconventional as their descriptions of what fibromyalgia actually is.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack these origin stories.
All right, so remember Ala, the one with the extraterrestrial implants?
Oh, yeah. How could I forget?
Well, she actually traces the first instance of fibromyalgia all the way back to a specific year, 1954.
1954. Okay, what happened in 1954?
She claims that gray extraterrestrials, the classic alien archetype.
Yeah, yeah.
She says they were trying to create super soldiers, and this was like their first experiment. But then later on, they started experimenting on civilians, too.
Wow. Okay, so she's saying fibromyalgia is the result of alien experiments.
That's what she believes, yeah. Now, obviously, the extraterrestrial part is a lot to take in. But it's interesting that she pinpoints a specific year. It makes you wonder if there was maybe some real-world event, some development in 1954 that, through the lens of hypnosis, she's interpreting in this way.
That's a good point. Like, what was happening in the world back then? Wasn't that like the beginning of the Cold War?
Yeah, you're right. The Cold War was ramping up. There was a lot of fear and anxiety around nuclear weapons and, the potential for global conflict.
Right, a lot of tension.
Exactly. So maybe that atmosphere of fear and stress, maybe that's somehow playing a role in Allah's experience, even if, it's not literally aliens causing it.
Okay, so that's Allah's origin story. What about Svetlana? What does she say about where fibromyalgia came from?
Her explanation is quite different. She believes the first case of fibromyalgia was a woman who was buried alive.
Buried alive. Oh my gosh, that's terrifying.
Yeah. And, obviously being buried alive is a traumatic experience. And Svetlana connects that experience to fibromyalgia. She says this woman experiencing this profound sense of entrapment and resistance to life, she basically imprinted that experience onto the collective human consciousness.
Wow. So she's saying fibromyalgia is like a collective trauma that's passed down through generations.
That's how I interpret it, yeah. And, it might sound far-fetched, but there is some scientific evidence suggesting that trauma can actually affect our DNA, like experiences of our ancestors can be passed down to us.
Really? Wow, that's incredible.
So even though Svetlana's story might be metaphorical, the core idea that trauma can have these lasting effects, even across generations, it's not totally outside the realm of possibility.
Okay, so we've got alien experiments and collective trauma. What's Karina's take on the origins of fibromyalgia?
Hers is actually maybe the most relatable explanation of the three. She links fibromyalgia back to childhood emotional trauma.
Oh, wow. Okay, so something that happens early in life can set the stage for fibromyalgia later on.
That's what she suggests, yeah. She talks about how this early trauma led to a buildup of stress hormones in her body, and eventually her body just couldn't handle it anymore. It was like it had to create fibromyalgia as a way to protect itself from total burnout.
Yeah. I could see how that would make sense. It's like when you experience trauma as a child, your body goes into survival mode.
Right.
And maybe for some people, staying in that survival mode for too long, it kind of throws everything out of whack.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Karina's description actually aligns with a lot of research that's being done on adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs.
ACEs, what are those?
Basically, it's a term for any kind of significant trauma that happens during childhood, like abuse, neglect, witnessing violence, things like that.
Oh, right, I've heard of that.
Yeah. And studies have shown that people who experience a high number of ACEs, they're actually at a much higher risk for developing chronic health conditions later in life, including fibromyalgia.
Wow, so there's a real, scientific basis for what Karina's describing.
There is, and it kind of brings us back to that mind-body connection we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, how our thoughts and emotions can impact our physical health.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, even though these origin stories are all so different, they all seem to point back to some kind of disruption, some kind of overwhelming experience that throws the body off balance.
Right. Whether it's alien intervention, a traumatic event, or childhood adversity, it seems like the common thread is this sense of being overwhelmed, like the body and mind can't cope.
That's a great observation. And it leads us to a really important question. What is it about these experiences, these disruptions, that might actually create the conditions for fibromyalgia to develop?
Good question. I guess that's something to explore further.
Definitely. We'll delve into that more in part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're ready for more because we are just getting started with this deep dive into fibromyalgia. In part 1, we got into some really unusual explanations for what fibromyalgia is and where it even comes from.
Yeah, we even found some connections between those kind of out there ideas and, actual science and psychology, like real concepts.
Which is so cool.
Yeah.
It's like these different ways of looking at things, they're starting to come together.
Absolutely. And I'm really curious to dig deeper into this idea we touched on that fibromyalgia might be the body's way of protecting itself, from being overwhelmed.
Right. That was a big one. Our bodies are trying to tell us something.
Exactly. So remember Svetlana's description? She talked about fibromyalgia being like a program, right? Overlaid onto the body.
Oh, yeah, the program, like some kind of software, but for our bodies.
Yeah, and she suggested that this program, it's connected to a really deep belief system, like a way of thinking that makes you resistant to change and prone to feeling trapped.
Right. Like you're stuck in this program and it's keeping you from fully engaging with life. Almost like you're in this protective bubble or something.
That's a great way to put it, a protective bubble. And it makes you think, what if this program that Svetlana describes is actually the subconscious mind's way of creating that bubble, to shield the individual from more emotional overload or energetic overload.
So it's not just about the physical pain then. It's about the beliefs and the emotional patterns that might be underneath it all.
Exactly. And this brings us back to that mind-body connection we talked about before, how our thoughts, our beliefs, and emotions, they can have a huge impact on our physical health.
It's like we're being challenged to see fibromyalgia not just as a physical thing, but as a symptom of a deeper imbalance, between the mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah, I like that, a deeper imbalance. So if we're thinking about fibromyalgia as this form of protection, then the question is, what is it protecting us from?
Ooh, good question. What do you think?
Well, it could be a lot of things, right? Maybe it's protecting us from pushing ourselves too hard, from taking on too much, from constantly being in that fight or flight mode.
Yeah, from burnout.
Burnout, exactly. Or maybe it's something even deeper. Maybe it's protecting us from having to face painful emotions, from dealing with past traumas, from confronting difficult truths about ourselves or our lives.
Whoa, that's deep.
Yeah.
Our bodies are stepping in and saying, hey, slow down. We need to deal with this stuff.
Exactly. And that might be why those conventional medical treatments, the ones that just focus on the physical symptoms, maybe that's why they don't always work so well for fibromyalgia.
Oh, yeah. You're saying if you're not addressing those deeper imbalances, the emotional and energetic stuff, then the body's just going to stay stuck in that protective mode, even if you're masking the pain with medication.
It's a possibility. And it really highlights the need for a more holistic approach, I think. So now that we've kind of established that fibromyalgia might be more than just a physical condition, let's get into those paths to healing that these individuals described.
Yeah, let's talk about solutions. What are they saying about how to actually heal from this?
Okay, so all I remember, with the extraterrestrial implants, she believes the key is to break these things she calls energetic contracts.
Energetic contracts, right. But I got to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on what that actually means.
Yeah, it's a kind of complex concept, but basically it's like an agreement, an unconscious agreement that we form with other people or entities or even with certain belief systems. And these contracts, they kind of bind us to a particular pattern or experience.
So it's like we're energetically bound to something and it's keeping us stuck.
Yeah, something like that. And I'll suggest that breaking these contracts, it requires deep self-awareness, you know? You have to be able to identify those hidden agreements and then consciously choose to dissolve them.
So it's like rewriting the rules, reclaiming your energy, setting yourself free from patterns that aren't serving you anymore.
Exactly. It's very empowering. And it kind of reminds me of, like, you know those limiting beliefs we all have? The negative self-talk that holds us back? Oh, yeah, totally.
Maybe those beliefs are like energetic contracts that we need to break free from.
That's a good way to think about it.
And this actually connects with what Svetlana emphasizes, which is the importance of internal work and shifting your perspective on life. You
All
know?
right. She talked about letting go of that victim mentality and becoming more, like, flexible in your thinking and in your emotional responses.
Exactly. She really believes that changing your internal landscape, the way you perceive the world, the way you react to things, that's crucial for healing fibromyalgia.
It's interesting how Alla and Svetlana, they have these completely different explanations, right? But they both say that you have to be an active participant in your own healing. It's not something that just happens to you.
That's a great point. It's about taking responsibility. Now, Karina's approach is a bit more concrete.
Right. She talked about those specific treatments like acupuncture and leech therapy.
Yeah, and she specifically mentioned this blend of natural remedies. It was like melissa oil, pine oil, dandelion extract, badger fat, and juniper. Badger fat? Wow, that's a new one.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting mix. And unfortunately, the source didn't go into much detail about how these remedies work. But we can make some guesses, you know, like Melissa and pine oil, they're known for being calming and relaxing. So maybe that helps manage the stress and anxiety that often comes with fibromyalgia.
Makes sense.
And dandelion, it's a natural diuretic, so that might help with inflammation. And then badger fat, it's been used in folk medicine for a long time, you know, for its warming and pain-relieving properties.
Interesting. But I noticed that she didn't just say, take these remedies. She also emphasized, like, the importance of intention. You know, like you have to actively participate in the healing process, not just passively receive treatment.
You're right, that's a key point. And it echoes what we were just talking about, you know, about taking responsibility. So even though these three individuals suggest different approaches to healing, they all seem to agree that it's about more than just the physical.
Right. It's about the mind, the body, and the spirit. It's about a shift in consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. A holistic approach. And it brings us to a big question. How do we evaluate all of this? Like, how do we know if any of what they're saying is actually true?
Right, because we're talking about some pretty far out stuff here. Extraterrestrial implants, energetic contracts, all that. It can be hard to wrap your head around.
It is. And it's perfectly normal to be skeptical, you know, especially when these ideas challenge the way we normally think about how the world works.
So where do we even begin? How do we start to make sense of all this?
Well, I think the key is to approach it with a sense of curiosity and an open mind. We may not be able to prove or disprove these claims with traditional scientific methods, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong.
Right, right. It's like, think about all those ancient cultures that had these really sophisticated systems of medicine based on energy and the spirit. You know, systems that modern science is only just starting to understand now.
Exactly. What we consider fringe or alternative today, it might be mainstream knowledge tomorrow, you know? As we learn more about the universe and how everything works.
Okay, so instead of getting hung up on whether or not these explanations are literally true, we can ask ourselves, what can we learn from them? How might they shift our perspective on fibromyalgia and, like, healing in general?
That's the spirit of the deep dive, right? We're not here to give definitive answers, but to explore possibilities, to challenge those assumptions, and to spark new ways of thinking.
I like that. And that actually leads me to another question. What about the power of belief? How does that fit into all of this?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a really important one, I think, because think about it this way. If someone really truly believes that they have an extraterrestrial implant causing their pain, that belief itself, that could have a very real impact on their experience.
Oh, wow. So even if there's no physical implant, the belief itself could be creating the symptoms, like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's definitely possible. And the same goes for energetic contracts or interference, you know? If you believe these forces are at play, then your experience of the condition, your ability to heal, all of that can be influenced by that belief.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about what's actually true or not true. It's about the power of our beliefs to shape our reality.
Exactly. And that's why self-awareness is so important. If we can understand our own beliefs and how they're shaping our experience, we can start to make conscious choices about what we want to believe, how we want to live.
It's like taking control of your own narrative. Okay, so we've talked about the validity of these claims, the power of belief, self-awareness, all of that. What else is there to unpack here? What else do these individuals tell us about fibromyalgia?
Well, we talked about it a little before, but I think it's worth going deeper into the specific ways that fibromyalgia affects people, on different levels,
Right.
physically, energetically, emotionally, mentally.
Right, like how does it actually show up in people's lives?
Exactly.
Hmm.
So physically, we know fibromyalgia causes that widespread pain, right?
Hmm.
The fatigue, the stiffness. But it's interesting to hear how our sources describe this pain. Like it's not just a physical sensation for them, it's often tied up with emotions and energy.
Yeah, like it's not just my R hurts, it's more than that.
Yeah, like Svetlana, she talked about feeling trapped and constricted, and for her, that manifested as tightness and pain in her fascia.
Right, and Alar, she described the pain as like a disruption of energy flow because of those implants.
And then Karina, she talked about the pain being connected to like a buildup of stress hormones and emotional tension, almost like the body is trying to send a signal that something is out of balance.
It's really fascinating how they all connect the physical pain to these deeper, non-physical things.
It is, and it makes you wonder, are we misinterpreting those messages sometimes? What if the pain, instead of being something to just get rid of, what if it's actually a sign that we need to pay attention to something deeper?
Ooh, that's a good question. Like, what is the pain trying to tell us?
Right. Instead of just masking the symptoms, what if we tried to understand the root of the problem?
Okay, that's the physical aspect. What about the energetic effects of fibromyalgia?
Well, both Ala and Karina talked about blockages and disruptions in the chakra system.
Right, the chakras, those energy centers in the body.
Exactly. And Ala actually described the implants as interfering with those chakras, specifically the ones along the spine.
Interesting. And what about Karina? What did she say about the chakras?
She suggested that these energy blockages, they contribute to that feeling of fatigue and depletion that a lot of people with fibromyalgia experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like if energy can't flow freely, then your whole system is going to be out of whack.
Exactly. And it really highlights how important it is to address those energy imbalances, as part of a holistic approach.
Okay, so we've got the physical and the energetic. Now, what about the emotional side of things?
Well, our sources were very clear about that. They all talked about emotional suppression, feeling like a victim, and blaming themselves as like major parts of the fibromyalgia experience.
Right. Svetlana, especially, she talked about that program being linked to a belief system of feeling trapped, powerless, and like at the mercy of everything around you.
And Karina, she said that the body's protective mechanism, the one that creates fibromyalgia, she thinks it kicks in to prevent total emotional collapse.
Wow. So it's like fibromyalgia is like a manifestation of unexpressed emotions and unresolved trauma.
That's a powerful way to put it. And it makes you think, if we could learn to process our emotions in a healthier way, if we could release the pain of the past, maybe we could break free from fibromyalgia.
Definitely something to think about. And it leads us right into the mental aspects, right? Like how fibromyalgia affects the mind.
Yeah, so mentally, fibromyalgia can cause negative thought patterns. It can make people rigid and inflexible in their thinking.
Right. Svetlana, she was talking about those self-destructive thoughts and feelings of injustice.
And Ella mentioned memory problems and even the possibility of seizures in really severe cases.
Oh, wow, that's scary. It's like your mind gets stuck in a loop of negativity, and you can't break free from the pain and limitations.
It can feel that way. And that's why it's so important to address those mental patterns. Svetlana, she really emphasized the need for mental flexibility, for learning to see things from different angles and challenging those self-limiting beliefs.
So it's not just about feeling better physically, but also about transforming your mind.
Exactly. And that brings us to the heart of what these sources are telling us, It's a more holistic understanding of fibromyalgia, one that includes all aspects of the human experience, the physical, the energetic, the emotional, the mental.
It is a lot to process, but it's pretty amazing too.
It is, it's empowering. Because if we understand fibromyalgia as this multi-layered condition, then we know that healing can't just be about treating the physical.
Right, we have to look at the whole person.
Exactly, the whole system. And that means being open to exploring those unconventional approaches, challenging our beliefs, embarking on a journey of self-discovery.
A journey of self-discovery, I like that. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's still more to explore.
There is. And we'll be back soon to uncover some final insights from these fascinating sources.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring fibromyalgia, And I gotta say, my head is spinning with all these new ideas.
I know, right? We've gone from aliens to buried women to the power of our own minds. It's been wild.
It has. But I think it's been good. Like, we're starting to see this bigger picture, right? A way of understanding fibromyalgia that goes way beyond just the physical symptoms.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's so cool about these deep dives. They force us to think outside the box and consider things we might never have thought of before.
So as we wrap up this exploration, let's try to pull out some key takeaways. What are the big things we've learned from these unconventional perspectives?
Well, I think one of the most powerful takeaways is the idea that fibromyalgia is multi-layered. It's not just one thing, it's a whole bunch of things happening all at once.
Right. It affects us physically, energetically, emotionally, mentally. It's not just about pain and fatigue. It's about feeling trapped, overwhelmed, and like out of sync with ourselves.
Exactly. It's about feeling disconnected. And that's where the need for a holistic approach to healing comes in. We can't just focus on one piece of the puzzle. We got to look at the whole picture, you know?
Right. Like taking care of our bodies, our minds, our spirits, all of it.
Absolutely. And that's where those unconventional approaches we discuss can be so helpful. Things like breaking those energetic contracts, shifting your perspective, exploring natural remedies. These are all tools that can help us address the deeper, non-physical layers of fibromyalgia.
It's like we're being asked to completely rethink how we approach illness. Instead of just trying to get rid of symptoms, what if we try to understand what the illness is trying to teach us?
Yeah, that's a really profound question. What if those symptoms, the pain, the fatigue, what if they're actually signals that we need to slow down, reassess our priorities, and make some changes?
Like our bodies are trying to get our attention.
Exactly. And maybe fibromyalgia is like an invitation to reconnect with ourselves, to listen to our bodies, and create a more balanced, harmonious way of being.
That's beautiful. And it's so different from the way we usually think about illness.
It is. And another important takeaway is that we have to take responsibility for our own healing. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix us.
Right. It's about being an active participant, exploring all our options, and not being afraid to try new things, even if they seem a little out there.
Exactly. It's about empowering ourselves to make choices that support our well-being on all levels. And remembering that healing is a process. It's a journey, not a destination.
And we can't forget about the power of belief. We talked about how our beliefs, whether we're aware of them or not, can literally shape our reality.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If we believe we're trapped and powerless, those beliefs can manifest in our bodies as illness and pain.
But the good news is we also have the power to change our beliefs.
Exactly. And that's really empowering.
So maybe healing from fibromyalgia or any chronic illness is really about rewriting the stories we tell ourselves. It's about shifting our perception and embracing a more positive, empowering narrative.
I love that. It's about taking control of our own stories. And that brings us back to the importance of self-awareness. The more we understand our own beliefs and patterns, the more we can consciously choose to create a healthier, more fulfilling reality.
So to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We explored the idea that fibromyalgia might be a protective mechanism, right? What if we took that idea seriously? What if, instead of asking, how do we get rid of this, we asked, what is this trying to teach me?
That's such a great question. What if the pain and the fatigue are actually signals that we need to slow down, reevaluate what's important, and make some changes? What if fibromyalgia is an opportunity to reconnect with ourselves, listen to our bodies, and create a more balanced and fulfilling life?
It's definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope it's done the same for our listeners.
Me too. And that's what the deep dive is all about, right? Exploring the unknown, challenging assumptions, and opening our minds to new possibilities.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into fibromyalgia. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.